Every single community you're going to be in has its fair share of stereotypes and its own sub communities within them. And I, as a person in the car community, I fall into the WRX, the Subaru WRX like stereotype sub community, I guess you could say. And there's a few pretty prominent stereotypes within the WRX community and the car community. There's a lot of layers, it's like an onion, but regardless, people who drive Subaru WRXs, especially more modern cars, are said to be lesbian and said to vape. Now, I am not either of those things because first, I'm a male, and second of all, I don't vape or do drugs, but that's against the point. Like the BMW community, Subarus or older ones, primarily older ones, are known to be reliable. And this is part of the massive stereotype within the car community. BMWs, Range Rovers, Jeeps, and Subaru WRXs, well, just mainly older Subarus in general, are known to be unreliable cars. Now, I drive a 2019 Subaru WRX after my 2016 Ford Focus ST got in a car accident, which resulted in the car being totaled. I'm going to put a picture right here. Pretty sad story. I loved that car. I mean, I still do love that car. I think it's an amazing, I was fortunate enough to have it as my first car. I think it is one of, if not, it's definitely like an S tier car when you're it's a first car, right? It's small, not too much power, no more than 300 250 horsepower. It's a manual car. It's light, nice and nimble. It's fun. It is definitely one of the top tier, like definitely top 10, maybe even like top 5 starter manual cars in my opinion, especially for its price and for its reliability, gas mileage, and just general space overall. Great car, 10 out of 10. But from this crash, insurance really helped me out, and so I was able to get a 2019 Subaru WRX. Now, this car that I bought, I got it with a couple of aftermarket modifications. Now, since it is a 2019 WRX, 2019 was only 5 years ago. Only 5 years ago. Geez, that's a while. It's on the newer side, no more than 54 or 55,000 miles at the time that it was purchased. But as I said, it had some aftermarket tunes. It had a stage 2 tune, it had a Cobb exhaust, a Cobb intake, all these different modifications that add to the horsepower of the car. Now, if you don't know what horsepower is, it is essentially how fast the car goes. Now, the car's speed and acceleration is determined by many different things, and this isn't a tutorial on how cars work, so I'm not going to get too in depth about it. To point the needle on the head here, the car is not stock. The car is modified, and I hope it's not illegal. I don't think it is, but the car is not stock, so it is not how it was when it was purchased from the WRX factory. That plays a massive part in today's video topic, which is cars are pain. As I said earlier in this video, later year, like slightly older, primarily Subaru WRXs and Subaru Impreza WRXs are pretty unreliable vehicles. The engine, I don't know the exact engine, I think it's like a Boxer 4, which means it has 4 cylinders. They are known for having head gasket issues, and head gaskets are essentially a piece of metal, I think it is, or like aluminum, that goes in the engine that separates the oil from the coolant and everything else. And if your head gasket explodes, you need to get a new engine, because that means your oil, your coolant, some water systems, all that stuff is just mixing, and your car is basically throwing a smoke screen like it's in CSGO. That's why older Subarus are less reliable, is because they have head gasket issues. Modern Subarus, if you don't modify them and if you don't drive them like your Paul Walker, they're fine. Generally, they're fine. Especially the same thing with modern BMWs. I don't know if it's the same with Jeep or Range Rover. I don't think so. But if my Subaru that's right outside right now, if it was stock, it probably would not have been having these issues right now. Because as I said, if you keep it stock and if you don't drive it like a dumbass, then of course, most, if not all cars are going to be completely fine, except for some maintenance things if you fail to get those checked up on, which I would recommend you, if you own a car, learn how to do your own maintenance, learn how to do your own oil changes, spark plugs, yada yada yada, because those things can get very expensive. And if you walk into a car dealership or a maintenance shop not knowing what you're talking about, some people unfortunately will take advantage of your lack of knowledge, which kind of sucks. Back to the story. So my car is tuned, which essentially means that a car tuner went into my ECU, which is the electrical control unit, I think it's called, or like the electrical computer unit. Basically, the part in the car that contains all the coding, it is the brains of the operation. And essentially what a tune is a person goes in there and it's a ton of different stuff, but put very bluntly, they change the fuel injection and they change the timing, basically allotting the car's engine to have more power. It's basically like overclocking a computer. And also with that tune, the stage 2 tune, so it's not stage 1, it is a stage 2, which means it's essentially slightly elevated than a stage 1. Alongside the stage 2 tune that I purchased the WRX with, it came with an exhaust and an intake, and then I think an aftermarket like fuel matching system, which essentially differentiates between fuel and water more efficiently, I think. And also, like I said, the exhaust and the intake, which also adds, it makes the car sounds great. The car sounds amazing. But it also adds like 15, 20 more horsepower, give or take. So overall, the car is definitely not stock, but it's also not pushing crazy numbers. I think it's 320, 330 wheel horsepower at most, which for a daily that gets over 30 miles per gallon on the highway is a solid number. I say to everyone in the car community, 250 to 450 horsepower on a daily is perfect. You don't need more than that. But now to the meat of today's topic. Recently, and by recently I mean 2 or 3 weeks ago, my car started throwing the engine code P0420, which originally it was the same code over time, right? Over these, like this month, let's say. But the code, like the little text description under the code, it changed after I did some changes. With most, if not all tuning cars, there comes a code reader or an access port, and you plug in the access port into like underneath the driver's seat, underneath the wheel, and you can read the engine's code from there. You can read essentially what your engine is putting out. You can read what the sensors are telling you. It's basically like looking at the information, the same information your ECU is using. So I plugged that in, and then you click read codes, and then right after the check engine light popped up, it said P0420, and then it said rear O2 sensor low voltage. The O2 sensor, there are 2 O2 sensors per exhaust pipe. My car only has one. It's not a straight pipe. It has a catalytic converter, which is actually the main source of this issue. But my access port said rear O2 sensor low voltage. And essentially that means the latter O2 sensor on the exhaust pipe, there's one before and after the catalytic converter. The one after the catalytic converter had low voltage. And so my dad and I worked on it a little bit. We took out, or actually he did all the work, sorry, but he took out both O2 sensors, and I'm going to put a picture up here right now. I am pretty sure it's easy to tell which one's new and which one's old. So then we replaced those, and then we did spark plugs, and then all the 60,000 mile maintenance stuff you usually do, and it was fine until it wasn't fine. The same code, P0420, check engine light came on again, and now it says catalyst efficiency below threshold, which essentially means that my catalytic converter is not performing as it is supposed to, and that is an emissions issue. Now let me put my mic down because I'm about to go on a rant here. The catalytic converter does exactly what it says. It converts the stuff that makes a car go, essentially. It converts a bunch of toxic fumes from the exhaust via chemical reaction. So first part of the exhaust pipe, catalytic converter, second part of the exhaust pipe, where the fumes actually leave the vehicle. Now these exhaust pipes originally are very harmful, or the exhaust fumes, are very harmful. They enter the catalytic converter, and the catalytic converter has this little honeycomb like filter shape thing. It's like if you took a coffee filter and put it under a microscope, and the fumes exit the catalytic converter via chemical reaction, and as I said earlier, the fumes are a lot less harmful. And the threshold for this check engine light code to appear, the P0420 code, is pretty high. If your catalytic converter is performing anywhere beneath 95% of its efficiency rate, then the code will appear. So I'm not too worried about it, but it is still a little bit concerning because I think I know what I have to do, and I think I know the issue that is causing this code. And because I've said I've already replaced the O2 sensors on my Subaru, that means that it can't be the O2 sensors, and the ECU is actually reading the issue correctly, which means the catalytic converter is failing. And it is failing because the car is not stock, which is both concerning and reassuring. If you get the code P0420, it will most likely say catalyst efficiency below threshold, in which that means that essentially the next few times your car has to take an emissions test, it will most likely fail. So now you have 2 options. You can either 1, replace the catalytic converter, which I most likely will do, or 2, you can go catless, which is illegal. So I'm going to be replacing the catalytic converter eventually, unless I can figure out some other way. But I'm gonna set my mic down again. This entire spiel is trying to say that if you work on cars and if you're a car person like I am, I'm wearing a Chevelle shirt, it's pain, because this ties all the way back to my Sisyphus video. You are essentially Sisyphus pushing the rock up a mountain, and then once you get really close to the top, it drops, right? Because it is a never-ending battle, because of course it's also a process of trial and error, unless you buy a car and keep it stock, in which case that's fine. You're just like Sisyphus if he just decided to sit at the bottom of the mountain and not really do anything with his life. But I don't mean to insult you, but as a car guy, you know, you have to get the modifications right, right? And so I've been having to drive without my cruise control on, because every time the P0420 code comes on, it disables cruise control, which I don't really care about. I think using cruise control in a manual car like my car is ridiculous. As long as it's not on like long road trips, and since I'm home for the summer, I'm not taking any more 2.5, 3 hour long drives anytime soon, I hope. But it just bums me out every time I have to get in my car and I see the check engine light on and blah blah blah. So overall, the car's fine to drive, and if your car is throwing the same code, it most likely is fine to drive. It's fine to push, it's fine to do whatever you want to it. But regardless, if your car is throwing a check engine light, then you should definitely get that checked out. As the light says, check your engine. But PSA, take care of your cars. Don't drive it like an idiot. Don't whip that hoe like it's a stolen Hellcat. Do not, because that will result, even if your car is stock, that will result in a ton of failures. It will result in misfires. It will result in a lot of broken stuff. So just be smart, because if you are fortunate enough to have a car, you should be smart enough to take care of it and do the proper maintenance, because trust me, that is a privilege, not a right. Driving is a privilege. But you know what else is a privilege? Modifying a car and not having any issues. Because if you're going to modify a car, 9.9 times out of 10, you're going to run into issues like I am. And in this case, it's even worse, because I didn't even modify this car. The person who had it before me modified this car. So maybe don't buy used modified cars. But who am I? I mean, this car, the Subaru, has been great so far, except for this little issue. It has been great. It's been giving me great gas mileage, like 27 to 33 on the highway. Like, that's amazing. It has a ton of space. It's a 4-seater. AC works great. It sounds great. 340 horsepower. Like, I don't even need anything more from the car. It just sucks that this engine light's on. And please don't let this video serve as a warning of some sorts. I'm just trying to put it into perspective that this is something you should expect, especially if you want to get into modifying cars like I am. The more research you do, the more you're going to realize that, whoa, ignorance really is bliss, because you're going to find all these different things that could potentially be wrong with your car, and then you're going into a rabbit hole, and then you're going to freak out and eventually sell your car for a used piece of shit. But that's only partially a joke. But regardless, keep yourself and the car in good shape and stay safe.